Let's do it. Engine performance 1 test 5, managing air and exhaust. The first question is, what is annealing?
Is that where it bends over?
A-N-N-E-A-L-I-N-G. Annealing.
A.
Is this the process of using valve overlap to allow the exhaust pulses to draw intake air into the cylinder? Or B, a heat treating process that takes out the brittle hardening of a cast iron casting? Or C, using hollow-headed bolts to connect to an exhaust manifold to a cylinder head? Or the process of using valve overlap to leave some exhaust gas in the combustion chamber, eliminating the need for an EGR valve?
I'm going to go with A.
Anybody else got any idea?
I'm going to go with D.
Or B.
Well, I'm gonna go with B then.
Let's go with
I'm
B.
going with A.
Okay, why are you saying B?
Because I don't know. I don't even know what annealing means.
Annealing is
But
when
it
you're
sounds like it's
annealing is whenever you're treating metal to make it less brittle.
Okay. So
Now, if you want to anneal,
So it is B.
if you want to anneal a piece of steel, if you want to make it where it ain't so brittle, how would you do that?
Heat it up, and then as soon as it gets hot, you
that's,
put it in the
that's what
cold.
it sounds like.
No, heat it up and let it cool off by itself.
And then you put it in the water.
No, that's brass. If you're going to anneal brass, you heat it up and you stick it in the water. Go. If anybody do any reloading,
It sounds like some
you reload
kind of process.
cartridges. All right, if you
I've done it once.
whenever you crimp the cartridges and and fire the gun and crimp them and fire them again, they start to split around the tip. They get brittle, so you heat them up and stick them in water, it makes them soft again. So they're less likely to do that. So you anneal aluminum. If you got a piece of aluminum that's hard and you want it to be soft, you smoke it up with your torch. You put your torch on that smoky yellow flame. You smoke it up, and then you get a neutral flame, and then you play all over that real back and forth until you get rid of all of that smoke. And then you let it cool off by itself and it's soft. So there's a bunch of different ways you can anneal different kinds of metal. But annealing has got to do with making the cast iron not so brittle. Of course, cast iron is going to be kind of brittle anyway. Technician A says to use only new exhaust manifold gaskets if they were used originally. To only use new exhaust manifold gaskets if they were used originally. Technician B says always use new exhaust manifold gaskets to allow for a slight warpage of the exhaust manifold. Now that's B actually, because a lot of your engines when they were built new were built, the ones that these people are talking about were built without any exhaust manifold gaskets at all. It was machined to where it fit perfect, and when you bolted them up, as long as you didn't take them off, you didn't have any exhaust leaks. However, your gasket sets all come with exhaust gaskets because their imperfections after the exhaust is heated and cooled a zillion times is going to make it not do right. Now on some of the General Motors, like the 350s, the exhaust manifolds they got 2 holes where each runner is, and they'll actually do they actually kind of look like that, and then it'll have a third one over here. But the long and the short of it is you got a hole here and a hole here and a hole here and a hole here. All right, let's say you pull an exhaust manifold loose from a cylinder head on a 350. And let's say that because of the expansion and contraction, these were closer together and your dadgum holes wouldn't line up. Wasn't like that when you took it off, but now that you've taken it off, all of this heating and cooling has made the exhaust manifold slightly change shape. There was a guy from Nashville Auto Diesel College that had graduated from up there that was down there, and he encountered that situation and said, what do I do about this? I don't have a clue, He said, this is not, do we put a new exhaust manifold in it? I said, well, the customer ain't going to buy that, So I said, what are we going to do? So anyway, I showed him a little trick that took about 2 minutes, and we fixed it, and he was able to get his bolts in the holes, and there was no problem at all.
So you heated it up?
No, I didn't use any heat at all.
You glued it.
You had to be smart.
You glued it.
Nope. What do you do? We want to actually spread these out so that the holes will line up again. You can't go crazy doing this or you'll break the manifold. Of course, if you do, you ain't gonna.
You bolted one end.
I got a socket. I got a piece of all thread with a nut, and I made a jack. Or actually, you can use a bolt. It doesn't have to be a piece of all thread. And you stick that in there. You put them down in between here, and you hold that while you turn that, and it jacks it apart.
You had to put a bolt in one end?
Actually, the thing that I built was right here like this. The socket was there, the nut was there, the head of the bolt was here. I hold the head of the bolt, I screw that this way, and that socket is pushing that manifold. Because you can take an inclined plane, you know, wrapped around a cylinder, which is what a bolt is, and if you can move just about anything with that, if you got a good strong hard bolt. That's how you do that. So you got to think outside of what you would ordinarily do, you know. All right, but anyway, that was just a little thing. But old manifold gaskets, old manifolds are not going to seal like they did. So you better put you some gaskets on there, and they better be exhaust gaskets. You can't put a piece of paper in there because they'll burn out. Okay. Which of the following is correct? A, water will not harm the exhaust system. B, corrosion forms in the exhaust system in the absence of moisture. C, a small hole at one seam of a muffler means it's damaged and must be replaced. And D, 1 gallon of gasoline produces a gallon of moisture during complete combustion. That is correct. All of the following statements are correct except what? A, most mufflers have a larger outlet than inlet. B, resonators resemble small mufflers and are used to further quieten exhaust system noise. C, mufflers catch the highest pressure air pulses from the exhaust system. Or D, most mufflers have a larger inlet than outlet.
B.
Must be B then.
All right, now think about it.
You just said, oh no,
There's
that's on
a
the
small
same line.
inlet and a large outlet, so it's got to be B.
Most mufflers have a larger outlet than inlet. Now, I don't, what I'm thinking, have you put a lot of mufflers on?
Not many.
Not many?
But it looks like the holes are about the same to me on the muffler.
Well, yeah, some of them. I mean, this is really a bad question. I mean, I don't like the question at all. And if you're going to make a muffler that you're going to make sure that it doesn't create exhaust back pressure that's not supposed to be there, I don't think it would be a good idea to put a small outlet and a large inlet. Do you? I don't think that would be a good idea.
Be able to, as much want to be able to get out as coming in with.
Yeah, I would. It's like a heater core. If you've got water going into the heater core, if you hook up the big side, you know, the big pipe on the heater core, and let the small pipe be the one coming back to the engine, you're going to bust the heater core. Or if you've got a restriction, unless somebody is going to pinch the heater hose to see if, you know, maybe pinching the heater hose cools the air conditioner down, you better pinch the one going in, because if you pinch the one coming out, the heater core is going to go poof, and you're going to have a heater core leaking. See what I'm saying? So you don't want to have a restriction there. My mind is it should be D. What sensor is usually located between the air cleaner and the throttle body?
Mass airflow.
Mass airflow. Huh? Which of the following student statements are correct? Wait a minute. Excuse me. All of the following statements are correct except one of these. A, the upper intake is called the plenum. B, the upper intake contains long intake runners for low RPM torque. C, the lower intake attaches to the head, and D, a leak where the upper and lower manifolds connect will usually cause a coolant and oil leak as well as a vacuum leak.
I go with D.
That's D. If the upper intake manifold doesn't have coolant flowing through it, typically it's just basically a plenum chamber. Now, what's a plenum?
That's the where the air comes in the cylinders.
Yeah,
That's the thing that sits underneath the.
It sits on top.
It's that. Well, I've seen them. I can't explain them, but they sit underneath that intake.
No, it's actually the upper intake.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a plenum. You're basically wanting the same amount of pressure to be fed to every cylinder, and so you've got that plenum chamber to collect pressure. You know, it's basically you're collecting it and you're having it in there, so whenever the cylinders gets their air, they're going to get the same amount to every cylinder. You got me something? Any kind of a plenum. Have you ever seen an attic fan?
Mm-hmm.
It's got a plenum. It's a closed chamber that you put air pressure into to make, you know, do a job or whatever. That's basically all a plenum is. And I mean, I could probably look it up and give you the dictionary definition of it, but that's just basically what you're talking about. When you see plenum, think about the upper intake. Okay. That's all it is. All right. See, The average gasoline engine uses how many gallons of air for every 1 gallon of gasoline burned at an air-fuel mixture of 14.7 to 1?
I'm going to go with 1,400.
I'm gonna go with the 9,000.
9,000 is the right answer. Joe remembered that. I've said this in here before, haven't I, Joe?
Yes, you have.
In what type system is the air and fuel combined in the intake manifold? Port fuel injection, throttle body injection, both A and B, or neither A and B?
Port fuel injection. Throttle body injection.
There you go. The air and fuel is combined inside the intake manifold. The whole intake manifold has air and fuel flowing through it from the place where it enters. That's like a carburetor. That's like throttle body injection. Where is the fuel put in there on sequential fuel injection, like on Melissa's car? And like on most of the other cars we got here, huh?
What's up? Say it again.
Isn't it right behind the valve?
Right above the valve.
Yeah.
Now, gasoline direct injection puts it right into the cylinder at really high pressure. So that's a different deal.
So it's mixed right there at the valve.
It's behind the valve. It doesn't squirt it right into the cylinder on regular injections. It just squirts it right behind the valve, right before the valve opens. You see what I'm saying? Right before the valve opens, it sprays, and all of that air carries that mist from that fuel injector into the cylinder, and that's when neat things happen.
That happens on my car?
Yeah. Her car's like that. Every sequential fuel injected car. The Bronco is not sequential. Sequential means it follows the firing order. On the Bronco, you got two banks. You got these two and these two. Poof, poof, poof. It's just got two injector drivers coming out of the engine controller on pins 58 and 59. And on that particular one, the grounds are 20, 40, 60, 16, and 49. You got to remember those too. There's going to be a pop test on that tomorrow. You got it?
What?
And the firing order on the Bronco is 137265448.
Okay,
you
you
got
speak too fast for us to remember.
137265448. And on
6548.
the Sable, it's 142536. On a 4.3, it's 165432. On a 3.1, or there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You got me?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, and it's on a Dodge pickup with a V8, or on a Chevy pickup, it's 184366572. On a 302, an older one, it's 1542638, but it's 137265448 on the later one. If it's a 59 model, it's 1548637.
What about a 77?
77 what?
Dodge 360 motor. What's the?
That's 184366572. It's the same as a Chevy, and the cylinders are numbered alternate. It's the same way on a Dodge as they are a Chevy. Bank 1 on a Ford is a passenger side bank. Bank 1 on a 2 is the driver's side bank if the engine's here like this, you know.
What's the firing order on a Honda Interceptor?
I don't even know what a Honda Interceptor is. I'm making this up as I go. All right. Now, actually, those firing orders were all accurate, and you will be having to remember all those. You need to have these memorized, you know. So you don't want to go look those up. Well, one time when I was working at Ed Davis's shop back in 1977. I was in there, and I knew about these spark plug wires. You know, the old man that did a little bit of carpenter work in the summer for. You know, I drove Daddy's pickup over, and I parked it in his yard, and then I went and shoveled dirt and drove nails all day. And Daddy said, have Oscar bring you back on the way by. He had a 66 Chevy pickup with a 283 in it. And he said, have him get some spark plug wire, because I was about 15, you know. And he says, put some spark plug wires on my truck, but have him drop you by the parts house and pick them up. Bought some plug wires and went by there and put them on there. I mean, I just pulled them off and threw them on the ground. And Oscar figured, well, I mean, I knew how to do it, but Oscar says, you know, he's an old man and knew me all my life. He says, there's no way this kid can know something I don't know, you know, because I was only a teenager. And he says, you can't just put them spark plug wires on any kind of way. He said, if you do that, it ain't going to start up. And I says, well, I just want to make it look pretty, Oscar. I don't really care about what you're saying. I'm going to think, this one here looks like it would fit here. And I was just like at random. And when I started it up and it ran good, he knew he'd been had. But the long and the short of it was, I got a Cadillac in there. I said, this is GM. I know all about this. I'll throw me some plug wires on there. And on that old Cadillac, it was the early 70s. You had to feed the stupid spark plug wires through the motor mounts and all that junk. And I put all them plug wires on there, and I wired it at 184366572. Yeah, hoo, hoo, fire coming out in the carburetor, boom, shotgun sound coming out the exhaust. Golly, what did I do? Cross some wires when I run through the motor mount? So I moved them around, boom, bam, boom. And the old man that owned the shop, oh, he said, go to the book and look that up. I'm sick of hearing that thing pop, you know. And I said, I must be an idiot. I thought I could put plug wires on the GM car. And I went in that stupid Cadillac, I got a firing order. It was all over the place, different from anything I'd ever seen before. I had to look that one up. Okay. What type system is the air and fuel? Never mind. Fuel separation with a TBI system can result in what? Wow, these questions get harder as the test goes on. Huh?
Both A and B.
We're going to have A, poor fuel economy, B, poor throttle response, C, both A and B, and other things can happen too. Like when that fuel is flowing through the inside of the intake manifold, if it's mixing up here at the throttle body of the carburetor, there's going to be beads of fuel on the inside of that intake manifold, right? Okay, so you've got air management system on your emission system that pumps air downstream, then you got upstream air and all this kind of thing. Upstream air when it's cold and downstream air to help the catalytic converter when it's warm on the old air management system. If that air management system is pumping fresh air into that exhaust when you're letting off, okay, what happens to liquid gasoline that's in little beads on the inside of the manifold when you let off? When pressure drops, what does the liquid do? It turns to vapor. It turns to vapor, it goes into the exhaust, and what do you hear when you put fresh oxygen in there with that hot, vaporized gasoline? Pow! You hear a backfire. Or you may hear boop, 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 boop. Have you ever heard them do that when you let off? That's what's going on there. You know, so if basically if you're thinking like an engineer, remember what I told you about fuel injected engines. There's 2 times when the fuel injectors are turned off during engine operation. Or I say during engine operation. When that thing's spinning over and you've got the gas pedal all the way to the floor, it's got the injectors turned off to dry the spark plugs off because they think you flooded. They call it clear flood mode. You mash the gas pedal all the way to the floor. Sometimes gas may be puddled up in the manifold, so you be careful when you do that, because if it picks up some of that gas, if it goes over 400 RPM, it's going to fire up. So don't get the idea that, you know, that's going to be just exactly that. But usually, if you push the gas pedal all the way to the floor and you spin it over, it ain't going to start. You scare the daylights out of your girlfriend or your wife like that when you're, you know, out at the burger barn or something. All right, so anyway, see, I told my nephew, I says, hold the gas pedal all the way to the floor. If it starts up, let off. If it don't, it's spinning. And she goes, oh no, it's broke down. So you get out and act like you're doing something. And you go, yeah, I took care of that. I mean, you know, impress the girl. Well, the long and the short of it is, there's another time the injectors are turned off while you're driving it. When is the injector turned off while you're driving it?
When you release the accelerator.
Why?
So that it doesn't flood the engine.
No, it ain't for that. It's because you don't need gas. So why put some in there? Why waste it? Why put gas in there when you're letting off an accelerator on a fuel-injected car? And the way the program is typed, and I've said this before, some of you might remember it, at a calculated pulse width of less than 1.2 milliseconds and an engine speed greater than 1200 RPM, the injectors are turned off.
Do we have to know that?
Yes. They will be on the test. Okay, you let off the gas. If the engine speed is greater than 12, and the calculated pulse width is less than 1.2 milliseconds, then it's going to shut them off. If it doesn't need any more fuel than that, let's just turn them off, because we're not using squirting fuel in there when you don't need it. It saves gas, it cleans the air, it does all kinds of stuff. You see what I'm saying? You don't have enough air in there, you don't need to put fuel either.
Does that mean when you're using the clutch to slow down and downshifting to slow down, it's not using any gas? When
you're actually got engine braking like you're talking about, exactly right. And one of my lunch partner, he says, am I saving gas on my Toyota Camry if I kick it up in neutral and coast down the hill with it in neutral?
I'd say yeah.
Yeah.
No.
You don't?
Because whenever you're using engine braking, which an automatic transmission has, when you're coasting down the hill, if the engine speed is greater than 1200, then it's going to shut the injectors off. And you're not using any gas that way. But when you put it in neutral and it goes below 1200, it starts squirting gas again. So you're idling going down the hill. You see what I'm saying? You have to think like a mechanic and not a yo-yo. You know, he's a computer support guy. A yo-yo, you know what I'm saying? All right. So EGR systems reduce what?
NOx emissions.
NOx emissions. With all different kinds of NOx. Why do they call it NOx? Anybody know?
Could be NO2, could be NO3.
NO2, NO3, NO4, NO5. It could be any. That's why X is actually like an algebra thing. X being whatever. Okay.
Whatever number.
Yeah. A dirty air filter can be reused if it's first blown clean with compressed air.
Not for long.
Well, every morning when I was combining wheat, we would take the air filter out of the combines and we would blow the suckers out. And we put them back in. However, if you only get that question right and Katie manages to be great in the test, you better put false, because the answer key says false. How I do when I'm pulling an air filter out of a car, you can be surprised. You pull an air filter out of a car, it looks pretty darn good. You might even be able to see light through it. Yeah. But if you drop it on the floor and a bunch of dirt goes, poof, you need an air filter. That was my rule of thumb at the dealership. If I dropped it on the floor, poof. Now one day, this pretty decent drivability guy, this mechanic over there, he was trying to figure out why this Mustang wouldn't start. It was a Mustang about like what Moody drives over there, you know. And so he's trying to see why it wouldn't start. And it was, and he had compression, he had spark, he had fuel. This is a different one than the one you're thinking I told about before. He couldn't get that sucker to start for love nor money. When he finally checked the air filter, this guy had gone into the drink and a bunch of mud went up into the air filter and it clogged the air filter weighed 10 pounds. I mean, it was that heavy with mud and it was so totally clogged up. There wasn't none of that dirt that made it to the engine, but he couldn't get away either because the dirt was there. But what happened is the kid had driven it into the drink, and before his daddy got there to find out what he had done, he pushed it back out of the drink and he washed it off to make it look nice and clean because he didn't want to get in trouble. It was a Joe Hargis thing. Okay, let me see here. Variable valve timing can be found on what type of engine?
Dual overhead cam.
Cam and block.
All of the above. It can be on single overhead cam, dual overhead cam, or cam and block. You can put it on any of them. The first variable valve timing that I knew anything about on any vehicle and even if you read in your textbooks, they'll credit that to the 1995 Ford Contour. And they would close the exhaust valve early to leave some of the exhaust gas in there so they wouldn't have to recycle it. So you had no EGR on that one. Some vehicles, if they can satisfy emission requirements without EGR, won't have it anyway. You know, like that Escort, it came without EGR. It doesn't have EGR on it. So, but anyway, to reduce oxides of nitrogen exhaust emissions, which camshaft is varied? Duh. Number 13, I just told you the answer to that one. Exhaust camshaft only. To increase engine performance, which camshaft is varied? That's number 14. Both the intake and the exhaust camshafts. Got it? Those diesel rabbits that I used to drive, and back years ago, whenever they first came out with those diesel rabbits, they got absolutely phenomenal fuel economy, like 55 miles to the gallon, those old diesel rabbits. But they didn't have enough power to pull your hat off. I mean, they were terrible. I mean, you could drive them, but I just didn't like them. Well, one day I went to Volkswagen school, and this instructor down at Volkswagen school, and I'm not going to say his name because this is going to wind up on YouTube, he says, look, we teach the Audi mechanics how to do this, so I don't know why we can't teach the Volkswagen mechanics how to do it. He said, you set your intake valves as loose as you can, as tight as you can, and you set your exhaust valves, within specs, as loose as you can. And then, this little screw here on the pump, you turn it in until it just starts to smoke a little bit, and then you back it out about a quarter of a turn. And I said, that's interesting. And my buddy came in there on his 83 Rabbit that wasn't all that old, and I did that to his. Because I didn't tell him I was going to do it, I just did it. When I did the valve adjustment and all that, I did exactly like the instructor told me. And he called me out. He said, what in the world did you do to my car? He said, I'm seeing some black smoke coming out back, but this thing will absolutely fly. I've never seen anything run like it before. Anyway, it was pretty interesting how you could just do a little something on those diesels and change everything about them, All right, so let's see. What is the commanded pulse width of the camshaft phaser that results in the desired position?
Set the phasers to stun.
Well, you might be right, but I don't think so. 50%. You know what a camshaft phaser is? This right here.
I don't want to get hit with it.
This is a camshaft phaser. This is a cam gear. It's kind of like you had on yours, right? And basically, they use oil pressure, and see these veins in there, how they move it back and forth? That actually can change the relationship of the gear to the camshaft, thereby changing the cam timing. And that's what they're talking about. And there's actually a solenoid that feeds that in there, and there's a spring on here and all that kind of stuff. But I disable that spring so I can move them things a little bit. But anyway, that's what a camshaft phaser looks like. These things go bad and have to be replaced. Sometimes on these later Model F-150s, they have to put new ones on them. And if you're a real cowboy, you'll get a chance to do one of those sooner or later. All right. Let me see here. Let me see. 16. Which sensors are used by the PCM to determine the best position of the camshafts for maximum power and lowest possible exhaust emissions? Which sensors are used? All of the above. Camshaft position sensor, engine speed, crank position sensor. How is the camshaft actuator controlled? This pulse width modulated signal. Pulse width modulated signal. What does that mean?
PCM controls it.
How long is it turned on when they turn it on? Is it turned on? Well, no, I mean the pulse width. If you got a pulse width modulation signal, you got a given amount of time.
1.2 seconds.
Yeah, if it's on all the time, that's 100%.
50%.
If you got it on half the time, it's 50%. If you got it on a third of the time, you know, that's 30%. So basically, it's a pulse width modulated solenoid that does that. It's a square wave thing. Matter of fact, I've got an animation showing you how that works that on that other computer over there that needs to be transferred to this one. All right, let me see. All right, let me get rid of those questions there. So we got to go back to the next page, number 3. If the engine oil is not changed regularly, what is the most likely fault to occur to an engine equipped with variable cam timing? Variable valve timing, not variable cam timing, excuse me. Number 18. The filter screens on the actuator control valve become clogged. And I will tell you this, anytime you're working on one that's got variable valve timing or a hybrid, you know, which those have basically got some of the valves that, you know, they cut off like a Prius that you see pictured up there behind you. This kind of stuff, you maybe make dadgum sure you find out what kind of oil those things take and put it in there. Now, if you're changing oil on something like that Chrysler Crossfire that Marianne Hudson drives, it takes 9 quarts of synthetic oil. It's a $100 oil change. Don't try to cut corners and put something else in there. If you want to keep yourself out in the clear in the shop you're working at or whatever, you read on that thing what it says to put in there, and you put that in there. You know, even if the customer's a cheapskate and they don't want to do that, and they say, if you want the oil changed on this and I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And it gets more and more important as you get into the newer engines that have the variable valve timing and the, you know, and the variable cam timing and all that stuff. How quickly can the rocker arms be switched from the low-speed camshaft profile to the high-speed camshaft profile on a Honda equipped with VTEC system?
100 milliseconds.
50 milliseconds.
That's 100 milliseconds. That's number 19. Number 20. Which diagnostic trouble code may be set if there's a problem with the bank 1 intake cam position?
C.
You should have this memorized. This is P0011. P0011. That's it right there. Remember that code. You may see it. If the incorrect grade of engine oil is used in an engine equipped with variable displacement engine, what diagnostic trouble code could be set? P0011. Anybody, have you ever seen one of those variable, you know what they do with that? I mean, you know how that works? All right. It's basically what you're going to do is you're going to stop the cylinder. I mean, some of the cylinders, like half of them from firing. You know, I told you yours is just different. On the GM, when you're driving along there, you're actually going to stop some of the cylinders, like every other one or whatever, from firing, and you're going to trap the exhaust gas in there, and you're just going to let it act like a spring. Boing, 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 boing. All right, if you require power, that saves gas. If you require power, you can get into it, and it wakes all those cylinders up again. You got it? Now on yours, which is at Triton, it's basically going to shut the fuel off and let some of the cylinders just pump air to save it in case it's getting too hot. You got me? That's what Triton means. It basically, if it's got cylinder head temperature sensors, if it gets too hot in the cylinder heads, it goes into that mode. And the instructors at the Ford school were saying he was trying to trick one of those into going into that mode, and he couldn't figure out how to do it. You know, how to trick it. But I have known of them that would come in here, they had blown a heater hose off or something like that, and they would actually start, he would go into that mode of, you know, it would throw you a code saying it went into the, you know, to save the engine or whatever they call that.
Hey, Rich.
Yeah.
Quick question. What is a PO420 and a PO521? Which one's which?
A PO420 is the one that tells you your catalytic converter is not storing oxygen well.
Okay.
That's basically, and a PO521 has got to do, I don't know, that's got to do with it's a speed code though. 500 series is either engine or vehicle speed typically. I don't know what the 521 is off the top of my head because I don't have all 10,000 codes memorized. You know what I mean? But I do know, well, see if you look up there. See it up there? See that little thing, a diagnostic trouble code breakdown up there?
Yeah.
If you look at it, you can look at you can break that code down like a 700 series code. If it's a P 1 or 0, and the third part of that, you know, 2 after the P is a 7, that's transmission related. You got me? If it's a 4, then it's related to air, which would be EGR or evaporative or something like that. Now, you know, if you're not taking me seriously enough to remember this, then it's going to be to your own hurt, because this is important stuff. Now, you just till I'll let the scan tool do my thinking for me, you know. Sooner or later you're gonna,
171?
huh? PO171 is an oxygen sensor code, basically. You know, so, but you can look up there, that legend is going to tell you how those codes are laid out. And if the second digit is a 1, that's a man. Okay, let me see. Which one?
22. Variable
valve timing is used to reduce exhaust emissions, increase engine performance, reduce engine wear. Both A and B. Technician A says superchargers are driven by the engine and crankshaft. Technician B says superchargers use a synthetic oil inside the unit. Who's right about that? Both of the guys are right. The supercharger is the one that's driven by a belt that's on top of the engine. We call it a blower, right? Mm-hmm. That one, the ones that you see like on your Thunderbirds, and even on this the supercharger on Donna Roberts' son's Buick Park Avenue Ultra, there is a little Allen wrench plug that you're supposed to take out every 30,000 miles and check the oil level in that supercharger, because he's got his own oil supply. You got me? And that's pretty cool on that. That Park Avenue, though, is really weird because it has a supercharger but no intercooler. And if you're compressing the air but you're not cooling it off, you're not getting the full benefit that you could get. You got me? All right, let me see here. Technician A says superchargers are driven by the engine crankshaft. Technician B says superchargers use a synthetic oil. We've already been there, sorry. Technician A says turbochargers send high pressure exhaust gas into the combustion chamber. Is that true? That is absolutely false. Technician B says turbochargers use a belt driven. No, they don't do that either. Neither one of those guys are right. The following statements are all correct except what? The turbocharger drains power from the engine. It does not drain power from the engine. The turbocharger feeds itself. And how does it do that? You remember? You know how the turbocharger works.
Yes.
How does it work? Don't just say, yeah, I didn't expect to get past that. You better tell me. Melissa, how does the turbocharger work?
The gas.
This is going to be on your verbal exam that I give you at the end. You better know the answer.
Exhaust.
What?
It runs with the exhaust. It recycles some, like it'll spin with the exhaust.
That's pretty smart. I mean, that's not a bad answer.
It pulls it from the intake, it goes through it, and then, like he said, it does pull from the exhaust. And goes through that way.
Right.
It circles and goes back to the detector.
What?
Yes.
All right, watch this. Watch this. I got two of these funky things here. Right? They're just real similar. All right. This one here is in the exhaust stream. This one here is in the intake. Right? Now, the exhaust goes by this one, because you're going to have to curl your exhaust back up on top to get, to get to it. And this one here, the exhaust spins this one. And this shaft is a continuous shaft. And while this is being spun, this is actually creating pressure in the intake. So the more pressure you create in the intake, you're increasing volumetric efficiency, and you're giving it more air, more power, and more flow. So this is feeding this, which is feeding this, which is feeding that.
They're just feeding each other.
Yeah, they are. But in order to keep it from going completely crazy and tearing the engine all to pieces, you have to have a wastegate to control it, so that some of the exhaust bypasses this wheel and don't spin it as quick if you get too much boost.
A waste gauge.
A wastegate. A wastegate actually opens up and lets some of the exhaust bypass this so that you don't overdo it. And some of these knotheads will try to defeat that so that they can have more boost. Typically, turbocharged engines would have in the beginning like stainless steel valves and stuff like that, because they're going to get hotter. Okay. Anybody ever take a torch and try to burn a piece of stainless steel? You get it cherry red and pull the trigger, it cools off. Because it won't rust and it won't oxidize like the other ones will. All right, let's keep going.
A.
Which one?
A.
22?
26.
26, I'm sorry. How many internal wheels does a typical turbocharger have? Yeah, that's A. Technician A says the turbocharger, turbine, and compressor wheels are on the same rotating shaft. What did I draw up here, y'all?
Yes.
All right. Technician B says it's a good idea to change oil in a turbocharged engine less frequently than a naturally aspirated engine. Actually, what you're supposed to do and the EPA people don't like it. What you're supposed to do if you've got an engine that's turbocharged, and Quincy's got one, by the way. As a matter of fact, Quincy's Power Stroke engine has got a variable geometry turbocharger on it, so that whenever the engine is not turning up very fast, it acts like a little turbocharger, and when it needs more, it acts like a big turbocharger. So it varies on that one, which is interesting to.
Does that mean it's got the vanes that move in and out?
Yeah. And the way Cummins does that is they make the turbocharger skinnier and fatter. They just got one moving part. Pretty smart. Okay, now we got let's see. Which of the following is essential to long turbocharger life?
All of the above.
You got that right? That's a D. All of the above are correct. Keep the dirt particles and contamination out of intake and exhaust housing. Flush the turbocharger unit when the engine is overhauled. Maintain a clean supply of engine oil. And let me tell you this, guys. If somebody has broken the air cleaner housing on their, big expensive engine or whatever, like if they put let's say the guy's put an air filter in there at home and he's busted the air filter housing and he's fixed it with duct tape.
Yes.
Some people do that will never keep that dirt out of there. You just may as well replace the air cleaner. And they say, well, I don't want to pay $150 for a replacement air cleaner. And you say, well, you'll be paying $18,000 for a new engine. If it's one of those diesel, because you suck dirt in there. If you got one that's puffing oil smoke and running like crap and all, and you pull that air cleaner and you look up in that air inlet tube and it's all coated with dirt, you have found your deal. This is a Florida number. Maybe he'll leave me a message. All right. Let me see here. Technician A says superchargers have a delay in their response. Technician B says turbochargers have a delay response called turbo lag.
Oh, you're on 29.
Excuse me, 29. I should have said 30. All these statements describe oil coking except A, when the engine is shut down, the turbo has less resistance and will continue to spin without proper lubrication. Is that true? All right. B, coking can be reduced by using engine oil to cool the turbocharger. C, this happens when the camshaft is starved for oil, or D, oil flow to the turbocharger stops when the engine stops.
D.
All right, C is actually the one that does not describe coking. Technician A says superchargers have a delay in their response. Technician B says turbochargers have a delay in response called turbo lag. That is B, but what I was just talking about, Quincy's truck doesn't have turbo lag because of the variable geometry. That does away with turbo lag when you have that. Number 31, atmospheric pressure at sea level, 40.7 psi equals what?
1 bar.
1 bar. And why do you think they say barometric? Huh? Okay. What technician A says a wastegate controls the flow of turbocharged air into the intake manifold. Technician B says the wastegate controls the flow of exhaust gas to turn the turbine. That's B. I talked about that earlier. The following statements are all correct except what? Not all the air that enters the centrifugal supercharger is forced through the unit. B, superchargers may be powered by gears, chains, or shafts. C, the root supercharger is a positive displacement pump. D, the supercharger output is the same regardless of engine speed. That's B, actually. Superchargers may be powered by gears, chains, or shafts. Now, those things are really strange. Those superchargers, they have these oddball rollers that interact with each other, but they're never supposed to touch. And what's funny about that is you can have one of these blowers on the bench, sitting up here where you got it propped up where you can get air under it, and you can take that thing and lay a rag on top of it, and you can spin that thing, and it'll blow that rag off of it. And when you look at the way this is designed, it doesn't even look like it would move any air, but it's that good at it. When you turn it, it will just spinning it with your hand, it'll blow that rag up. It's really something how that works. Let's see, Technician A says the pulley on a centrifugal supercharger is larger than the crankshaft. Technician B says that centrifugal superchargers are driven by exhaust gas. That's D, actually. If I wanted it to spin faster than the crankshaft, would I put a bigger pulley or a little pulley? Yeah. If I want speed, I'm going to have a small pulley. If I want power, I'm going to have a large pulley. Give me an example of a component on the engine that uses a large pulley. I'm not talking about the crankshaft because it's providing the power.
Alternate.
Power steering pump.
That's a little pulley.
Power steering.
That's a small pulley.
That's a small.
That's going to spin fast. It's not going to give you power. It's going to, and I'm not talking about electrical power, Willie.
Okay.
It's going to give you. It's. I mean, if you. What else? Power steering. It's got a large pulley. What else has a large pulley? Huh? That's not a pulley.
I know that.
Huh?
I know that.
Yeah. All right. So what else? Yeah, that's not a bad answer. A water pump's got a pretty. Air conditioner is a good answer. It's got a fairly large one because you don't need a lot of speed, but you need a lot of power. So any pulley that's going to be pulling something that has to have a lot of power, power steering pump pulleys are usually huge. I mean, they're almost as big as the flywheel. I mean, as the. Listen to her. She got me messed up. All right. So anyway, that just took care of that. Which of the following is correct? Does the bypass valve open in reverse gear? Yes or no?
No.
Does most manufacturer-equipped supercharger have a bypass valve to control boost?
Yes.
Does the bypass valve close during this acceleration?
No.
All of these are correct.
So B.
D. All of them are correct. Hey, I tricked you guys. You know what I'm going to say? All right.
That's not cool.
I know.